What I've done is I did a little bit more thin white and blue rubbing around with this brush right here, just sort of scrunching on it, and I added a little bit of darkness down in here. So this is what the kind of thing you're doing next. We're at the detail phase right now. This is a flat brush, the same one we used before, and what I'm trying to do is giving it more dark and more light. So take a look at your reference photograph. You'll see the reflections of the water, the reflections of the trees in the water. What you can do is you can take a little dark on your brush and give some indication of those evergreen trees there. And where you have a tree, occasionally, you don't have to do it everywhere, but you can do a corresponding reflection down in here to get it started. This is a river, but it's a slow-moving river, and so, especially this time of year, so we're going to see a lot of reflections in it. When you look through the reference photographs and when you look at water, even if it's pictures of water, pictures of rivers, you'll see that sometimes you'll see more reflections than others. I go to the river every day. I'm really fortunate to live where I live for a time, and so I see the changes over the course of a few hours sometimes, and I can watch reflections. I'm adding just a little bit of interest here. Now, I had already done some indication of dark ripples in the water there. I'm taking my even darker and sort of accenting those. Now, if you remember in the observation video, there was a lot of reflections in one of the scenes of the river, and what makes those reflections really pop out, not reflections, I guess I mean highlights. You saw a lot of bright highlights. When you put something dark next to something light, that's how it accents it. So just gently adding in. I'm using my brush flat sometimes, and sometimes just a little bit on its corner. Get used to knowing that just because a brush is one shape doesn't mean you have to use it that way for everything. So it might be fun to do a painting with only one brush, using it all different ways. Giving a little bit of dark in here. If it gets too dark, because these are the furthest away trees, I can always add more light back into it, because you can do whatever you want with acrylic. Super cool. And I'm using the brush on the corners there. Alright, so that's good enough for now. I'm going to go back and look at it later. Maybe I'll do a few branches with my liner brush. I'm not concerned, and when you take a look at yours too, if you have some fuzziness in the trees, that's okay, because if trees are further away, they're going to appear with less definition. So it might be that your trees that you have in your painting might have several layers in them, which gives it more interesting too. So we've got the fronts coming up. I am going to go to a small flat brush now. While I'm working on the trees, I'm going to keep working on the trees and first I'm going to touch it to my card or paper to see that I don't have too much paint on there. This is fairly thin paint. I've kind of almost watercolory today. So I'm going to give, again, we've got so many evergreens in Oregon. I'm just going to give an indication using the side brush of some of these trees here. This is a fairly dark color, but I'm going to do the same thing with some lights. The horizontal branches. So we're not trying to paint every branch. Just give an indication on the outside edges. Like if you just paint some area like this, that's the top, that indicates it's an evergreen, then it will read as that. It's more interesting because that's what we're giving our own impression of it, and that's what we want our painting to be. Is we want it to be not a realistic imitation, but what we see and what maybe a feeling that it gives. like this day, which is kind of a hazy day is my goal. So my darks are, I've got my light coming from up here, so I'm going to have some highlights on these clouds, and I'm also going to have some highlights on the trees. We'll do that next, so that I'll declare these trees done for now. Because to declare a painting done, sometimes you just know that it's done, and other times you just have to stare at it for a while and think, oh, I'm going to do a little bit more, a little bit of that, but not to belabor it too much, because you don't want to, you can't wait till it's perfect. Okay, that's fine, because I really need to stand back and look at it. Now, since I've got green on my brush, I'm going to go and do some in here. I think I might do the water last. By the way, I love doing these little dots. I happen to have this sort of bright yellowy color on here. It's not white. We don't use white out of the tube much at all. I usually will color it with a little bit of yellow or a little bit of that pink that I really like. While that's on here, that's a little bit too yellow for right there, but it looks good right there next to the green. So I'm going to change my mind here, and since I've got white on this brush now, I hope you can see that. It's not white, it's actually pretty dark, but it's whiter than what's next to it. Little dots. Oop. I may decide to keep that, maybe not. Little dot. I'm not pushing down very hard. And then sometimes these reflections go straight through the tree lines. I'm not adding a whole bunch of reflections like are in the reference picture. Maybe I should. Let's see what happens if we make this darker. Just dabbing here. Trying to take care not to go over those white ones I just did, because I like those. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take, since I've got a tree right here, I'm going to take do an indication right below where those trees are, because that water's going to reflect. Sometimes the tree reflections are so long, and it all depends on the angle of light. That's a good start right there. Something tells me that I want to add a lot more dark in here, where those shadows are. The shadows that the sun is creating by, this is Prussian blue and raw umber. One thing I haven't done is I haven't added too many bushes in front. You don't need to. I painted this scene several times, and sometimes I'll add kind of these bushy trees and sometimes not. This kind of all depends. So let's say these are bushy trees in case some of you guys are adding some of them in. Just blobby, like this. I'm not going to go over that because I like that darkness in there. So now I'm going to change, just wipe this out. I still haven't used my green out of the tube. I don't know that I will. I don't want to make this segment too long, so I'm going to move ahead and do this, and then finish the water in here so that y'all can get painting. And on here, I'm going to add more dark. I've used this brush a lot on this painting. Add super dark. brush on its side. I want to add this in here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back in and add some lights to contrast with this. I think what I might do is make like a leafy thing or reeds coming out here. Got dark on this too. My paint is a little bit thicker right here. These are just some close-up tree branches here. Okay, I'm going to let that dry, and then I'm going to do one more thing on the video, which is to show you how to go back and punch out the clouds. Probably should not do what I do, which is just laid my brush down. Probably you should wipe them off and put them back in water or spray. I have let too many brushes dry out. Let's see here. It's kind of hard to see with my reflected light, but I'm just going to add, only thing on my brush is white. I'm just adding a little bit. These are dry. The sky is totally dry. Then I'm going to take a brush with nothing on it, and I dip the brush and then wipe it off. And that gives them there a little bit of water, but not too much. And then I'm just going to do, kind of remove some of that paint there and leave it heavy where I want it. This is kind of a little watercolory thing. One great thing about acrylic is that once it's dry, it's dry. You can't do this with watercolor. With acrylic, you can go back in because the bottom layer is not going to come up. It's hard, solid, dry. Okay, so at the end of this then, we've got some details. I'm going to go back and add some light. Let me do a quick show you of how I would do that. I've got this brush right here, dip in water, wipe it off, add, I'm going to mix up a light yellow green here. I'll do it on a card. This is a new brush and it's leaking bristles. Blue and yellow and white. Depending on the blue you're using, you'll get a slightly different color. I'm just using cobalt blue right here. And then I'm going to sort of test it on here. That's pretty good. So I'm using this brush just on its side. You could also use a liner brush. But I'm not blending, I'm just kind of dabbing. Putting these where there is darkness. See how the contrast is? That's going to make them pop. And also not everywhere. One thing that's very important, this is an important takeaway for painting nature, is that nature is not necessarily symmetrical or even. As humans, we want things in order. We want to have things match. But it's definitely, you don't want to stand back and see evenly spaced clumps of one type of foliage. So some of you might have to work at that. All right, that's all I'm going to do for now. All right, so you are done after you do a few details, because then you need to look at your painting and figure out what you want to do next. And then once it's dry, sign the painting. That's important. Yay, go you. I'm so excited. So the next lesson is going to be this exact same scene, only sunset. And I did this just kind of as an example, but it didn't mean to be. I just did this the first time. It's like exactly the same composition. When I do the painting with you next week, I'll do a different style of composition. All right, enjoy. Have an awesome day.